So this morning I'm looking on Facebook and I noticed that a guy that I was locked up with just got sentenced to go back to prison. It's crazy. I know so many guys that I've met from prison who end up going right back to prison. It's kind of like a revolving door once you get wrapped up in the judicial system. God, I almost was not able to pronounce that word at all. Judicial system. So in this video, I want to tell you about 3 different guys that I met while I was in prison who unfortunately are on their way back to prison right now. The crazy thing about all 3 of these stories is all 3 of these guys didn't even last 1 full year out in the free world before they ended up where they are right now on their way back to prison. All 3 of these guys have crazy stories, one of which who I even featured in a video here on After Prison Show, funny millionaire prison scooter guy. I'll include a link to that video down in the descriptions if you want to see that video. And one of which, the last that I will tell in this video, is probably the craziest damn story you will ever hear. I want to start by telling you about a guy named Ryan. Ryan is actually the guy that I just saw on Facebook who was sentenced to go back to prison just yesterday. I met this kid Ryan during the last 2 years of my incarceration at the last prison that I was at. Ryan was a young kid. He was in his early 20s and he had been locked up since he was like 16 or 17 years old straight. This kid had already done something like 5 to 7 years in total when I met him. And to be honest with you, Ryan was a really cool kid. Unfortunately though, Ryan was a gang member. A young kid in a gang. I mean, it was just a recipe for disaster. But even as a gang member, Ryan was still a really alright guy. He wasn't the kind of guy who went around looking for trouble, trying to start stuff with other prisoners. But if his gang did have problems, Ryan would ultimately have to become involved with that. Ryan loved tattoos as well. In fact, Ryan had some pretty damn good pick and poke tattoo work that he had gotten done throughout the course of his time being locked up. And I'm pretty sure that Ryan also came home from prison after I was released. I was released on October 13th, 2015. I'm pretty sure Ryan came home sometime after that. But I can specifically remember seeing him post on Facebook about things that he was trying to do. I had even talked to him a few times after he had come home. And I remember that he was really having a hard time finding work. He would find like hit or miss work. So he really was just having a tough time adjusting after being locked up for so many years, and especially at such a young age. Throughout the short time that Ryan spent out here in the free world, he met a girl, they became involved, and then something happened. I'm not exactly sure what happened. All I know is that it involved this girl, and because of something involving this girl, Ryan ended up getting locked back up again. Well, it was just on this past Thursday that I began seeing posts on Facebook saying that Ryan had trial on the following day, Friday. And it was just this morning that I saw a post updating Ryan's situation, saying that he was sentenced to 15 years with 10 suspended, leaving him to serve a 5-year prison sentence. There was also a lot of mention in the post about this girlfriend of Ryan's, or this ex-girlfriend of Ryan's, and how she had come to court and testified against him in whatever exactly the case actually revolved around. But it was just so damn unfortunate seeing this post, seeing that Ryan was just sentenced yesterday to 5 more years in prison, when just on the day before that there was so much hope that he possibly could have been released yesterday. There is this saying while locked up about going to court that goes, you have to go to court preparing for the worst but hoping for the best. And I really just hope that Ryan walked into that courtroom yesterday with that thought in mind. Prepare for the worst but hope for the best, because there is no worse feeling than going to court so hopeful that you will be released and then things going completely opposite of those hopes. I really feel bad for this kid Ryan. Again, I knew this guy while I was locked up. I knew he was a good kid, but it's just so crazy how you could be trying to do the right thing out here and get mixed up with the wrong people, whether that's gangs or even a female, and things basically just snowball from there, leading ultimately to a person having to go back to prison. Next up, I want to tell you about Yanni. Now, Yanni is a guy that I actually featured in a video called Funny Prison Millionaire Scooter Guy. Again, I also met Yanni while I was locked up this very last time. Pretty similar to the Ryan situation. I met him somewhere around my last 2 years of being locked up. And me and Yanni were actually really good friends while locked up. So much, in fact, that I even featured Yanni in a video here on After Prison Show. Again, the link to that video is down in the descriptions if you want to check it out. Yanni was probably one of the smartest guys I ever met while locked up. I mean, this guy really had a lot of knowledge. He was smart about sports. He was smart about business. He really was one of the smartest guys I ever met. But unfortunately, smarts aren't everything when Yanni's biggest problem was battling himself inside of his own head. And then add right on top of that, Yanni also battled addiction problems. Alcohol and heroin being the two biggest obstacles standing right there in front of him. I remember that Yanni was released a short time before I was released. He went home, actually worked at the same concrete pouring job that I was working at. Ended up getting fired from there because one thing about Yanni, he will tell you exactly how he feels and he does not care what you think about that. But when he was fired from this job, he started his own landscaping business, and this business did really well. Him and another guy that I was actually locked up with started this business together, and they were really booming with this. So much, in fact, that I even went and worked with these guys for a couple of days when I didn't have work at my concrete job. I talked with Yanni quite frequently once I came home and began After Prison Show, and I really had high hopes for bringing him on board with After Prison Show. I mean, he really had a personality that I considered belonged somewhere in Hollywood. This guy really should have been a movie star instead of having to be getting in trouble. But unfortunately, no matter how smart or successful a person is, if they have addiction problems that they cannot overcome, then ultimately those problems will be their downfall. And for Yanni, that was the case. Yanni suffered from such a bad addiction to alcohol that they actually had him on a medication that made it impossible for him to drink. I can't remember exactly what this medication is called, but this is a medication for alcoholics who take this medicine, and if they try to drink any kind of alcohol while taking this medicine, they automatically become sick and begin to throw up, I think like violently. So for a while, Yanni was doing okay taking this medicine, but then he stopped taking it and then he began drinking again. And I will never forget the day Yanni called me while I was at work at my concrete job, and he told me that it was very likely he was going back to prison. I couldn't even believe this when he told me, and then he told me the story of what happened just that night before when he went to some concert with a friend, got drunk at this concert, became belligerent, ended up getting in a fight with a guy. He literally hit this guy one time, knocked him out, he says. Security at this concert basically tackled Yanni and was taking him outside to kick him out of the concert. The guy that he had hit and supposedly knocked out did not want to press charges on Yanni. I mean, if there was going to be a break for Yanni, it was that moment right there where that guy said he was not going to press charges on him. But because Yanni was so drunk and so belligerent, they actually had to call an ambulance to take him to the hospital. And it was when he was in that ambulance on his way to the hospital that he kicked an EMT in the face. And I don't know if you know this or not, because I certainly didn't know this until he told me, but if you assault a medical worker or an EMT in any way, that is an automatic felony. That is pretty much the same exact thing as assaulting a police officer. He was arrested that night, bonded out by his parents the next day, but he knew this felony charge he was going to be found guilty of and ultimately sent back to prison. And it was him knowing and thinking that absolutely led to this snowball effect for Yanni going completely downhill. It wasn't but like 2 days later that Yanni texted me telling me he is about to do the biggest shot of heroin in his life, hoping to kill himself so that he does not have to go back to prison. And that was the very last time that I heard from Yanni. I mean, I tried to text him back, I tried to call him to find out where he was. He wouldn't respond, he wouldn't answer his phone. I was at work, there really was nothing I could do other than to try to reach out to him, which I couldn't do. But that was the last time that I heard from him until like a month later when I found out that he was locked back up. This last story that I want to tell you about is by far the craziest. I want to tell you about a guy named Ronnie Cisco. I knew this guy Ronnie Cisco while I was locked up. Just like the last two stories I told you, I met him during the last 2 years of my prison sentence. It's kind of ironic how I met all three of these guys during the last 2 years of me being locked up. But the first thing that I want to tell you about Ronnie is that he was gay. Not only was he gay, he even had a boyfriend while he was in prison. But here is the twist to this whole thing. Ronnie was not exactly somebody that you would want to say anything bad to. In fact, Ronnie was a pretty badass dude in prison. I remember hearing the story about Ronnie in his housing unit, how while in the shower, other guys wouldn't want to come in there with him, or while other guys were in the shower, they would be uncomfortable when he would come in there because of the fact that he was gay. And Ronnie literally went in front of the entire housing unit and said something along the lines of, if you've got a problem with me because I'm gay, come see me right here in the front of this housing unit and put your shoes on. The easiest way to put it is that Ronnie was a fighter. Not only was he a fighter, he was like a hell of a fighter. This guy was in the Marines. He had like the toughest workout regimen I ever saw of anyone locked up. I mean, this guy was pretty much TTG, trained to fucking go. And there wasn't gonna be too much disrespecting Ronnie or saying anything about him being gay without this guy probably being ready to fucking kill you. Ronnie was released like a year before my release date. And after he was released, nobody heard anything or even talked about this guy Ronnie until one day when he ended up on the news. I ended up seeing this news story about this guy Ronnie, and I honestly just couldn't even believe it. I was so shocked by what I had actually seen that happened with this guy that it really just emphasized the point to me right then just how precious life is, and also a person's life out in the free world after prison really is. But what had actually happened with this guy is he was in a bar during a Redskins Cowboys game. He began to argue with another guy in the bar during this football game, and this argument quickly turned to these two guys standing up ready to fight each other. Ronnie stood up, the other guy stood up as well, and Ronnie hit this guy. The news story actually shows surveillance footage from this bar capturing this entire fight. And when Ronnie went to hit this guy, he missed his face and literally hit this guy right here in the throat. When he hit this guy in the throat, he hit this guy in a place that immediately killed him. In the footage, you can actually see Ronnie go to hit this guy, miss his face, hit him in the throat. The guy fall to the ground and Ronnie basically just walked right over top of him. He probably had no idea that he had killed this guy. He probably just thought that he knocked him out, felt like a big badass for doing so, walked over top of this guy. But the way that it looks in the footage, I mean, it just portrays this guy as a stone cold fucking killer. And because of this bar fight that led to this guy dying, I'm quite sure that when Ronnie went to fight this guy, he wasn't planning on killing him, but he did. And he ended up getting sentenced to 14 years because of this bar fight gone horribly wrong. You know, to me, all three of these stories symbolize just how precious life is, and also how precious life is out here in the free world after you have been locked up. And to me, this really showcases just how easy it is to go right back to prison. All three of these guys' stories are pretty fucking eye-opening to me. Hey, look, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did so, please leave a like and a comment. Let me know what you think about all three of these stories. And until next time, as always, please enjoy life, the free world. Never take a moment for granted, and make the most of every day. Peace! I want to start getting back to shout outs here on After Prison Show. Yesterday I left a code word, and if you found that code word, there was a possibility I would shout you out. That code word was eBay. So let's go ahead and shout out John Jones, Justin Newton, Logan Benway, Alexandra Parker, Samantha Stahl, Apocalypse, Luke Fitzpatrick, John Calloway, Turk182, Blue Atlas, and Matrix. Thanks to all of you for finding that code word, and to everyone else as well. And that's it. Peace!